Welcome to Bigger Than the Game with Deremy and Jose. I'm Deremy Dove. I'm joined by my tag team partner, Jose Ruiz. What's going on, man?
What's going on, Deremy? How you doing, man? It's good to be here. It's good. I can't wait for this episode.
This one I've had circled for a long time, and last May we did an episode and a rewatch on the '02 Kings, and obviously a big part of the '02 Kings was Chris Webber. And since then, I remember telling you right after, I go, next year's 30th anniversary of the infamous Webber time, the most famous timeout in sports history, probably.
Yep.
The Chris Webber timeout. And so we're doing a rewatch, so you can listen to it or watch it on our YouTube channel. The rewatch of the '93 national championship game for the 30th anniversary. Michigan, North Carolina, the Fab Five. We'll go from Michigan against Carolina and Dean Smith going for that second title. And Jose, I'm gonna come out hot with you, man.
Oof.
We know what this game's about. We're doing the rewatch. Chris Webber, this still looms over him 30 years later. This thing is still talked about. It's still infamous. Do you think Chris Webber brought that a lot on himself, or has it not? Have we been unfair to Chris Webber as sports fans these past 30 years?
Man, that is a tough one. I
Coming
think,
out hot, baby.
I think he has a big part to play in that. You know what I'm saying? Like, and this is still infamous. Like 30 years later. Like me and you were talking the other day, and I can't remember what player it was. It was a player. It was an NBA game. And he called a timeout, and then he had any.
Was it Ivy?
It might have been. I honestly I don't even remember the name, but the first thing the announcer says, "Oh no, he pulled a Chris Webber." It's like the first thing. This is an NBA team in 2023. You know what I'm saying? Like an NBA game, and the announcer, that's the first thing he says. So it's still infamous. I think, to answer your question, I think he's made it worse. You know what I'm saying? Like if he comes out and says, "Look, like I thought I heard somebody say call a timeout," or I could have been wrong with that, or whatever the case, it was a big mistake and whatever. Like, I think people don't beat him up as much, but I think, in my opinion, for him not even to like discuss it or not even to want to talk about it, not even to his own teammates, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think makes it like even worse. I don't know. I can't even like put my finger on why, but it's just, I just feel like if he comes out, if he would have came out that night or couple of days later or whatever the case, and just like I made a mistake, or I thought I saw somebody call timeout, and and I did that, but I panicked, and that's what happened. Like, I think people would, America loved that shit. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you come out and you apologize and blah blah blah, like people forgive you for that. But for him not even to acknowledge it and not even to talk about it, I think it makes it worse.
No, I think it's interesting. It's just sometimes you just wonder, because you got to realize, a lot of us forget sometimes that these were young college kids, even though they were brash and they were in the spotlight. The Fab Five was really popular. They were everywhere. But he's a college kid. He's 19, 20 years old at the time. So, there's that part that I look at now and go, man, like he was a young man. But then he did not really he addressed it. He did talk. He did press conferences that night, to be fair to Chris Webber.
No, he did. He did.
He did speak that night, but afterwards he tried to distance himself from everything with this game and with the Fab Five, even before the Ed Martin booster scandal that he had trouble with back in like 2002. For those who don't know, Ed Martin he got, I guess, convicted of it, of paying certain players in the Michigan area, like a booster for Michigan, and paying them throughout. And it came out that he had paid Webber and his family since middle school, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and Webber gave him a check back, all that kind of stuff. So, people can throw that in there now, which is true. I think that added to Chris Webber really distancing himself for, I think honestly still present day, to be quite honest. And also the school made him distance himself, but he was doing it before then.
Right, and I think just recently, like I think of last year, especially since Juwan Howard started coaching the team, I think I saw him at a game last year or something like that. Like, So I think just recently, and again, this is 30 years later, he is just starting to come back, back to the school and things like that. I know for a period of time there he couldn't come back, but now I think he's starting to. But for a long, long time there, even when he was in the NBA, people would try to ask him questions about it. He wanted no parts of it. He would shut it down. That infamous 30 for 30, the Fab Five that came out very early on, one of my favorite 30 for 30s, especially one of my early favorites. He was not a part of that. You know what I'm saying? Like, he denied being interviewed for any of that. And I just think that would have been another good opportunity for him to kind of like, not squash everything, but just kind of come out with his own truth. You know what I mean? And even when they were interviewing like Jimmy Jackson and all these other guys, like, they always like talk about it, and it's just like they don't even know. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it's just, I said Jimmy Jackson. I'm thinking of my Ohio State stuff.
Yeah, I know. I'll let it go. Jimmy King, Ray Jackson,
and like they interviewing those guys, and it's like he hasn't even talked to, supposedly, he hasn't even talked to that about this incident with them, and I think that's even worse. You know what I'm saying? Like, at least talk to them about it, squash that with them, but no, he has not, and I think he just made it worse for himself.
No, I think the sad, one of the many sad parts is we're going to see, if you're watching, you're listening to us. Chris Webber plays a phenomenal game in this game, right, before this infamous timeout, and it gets it's not cliche. I believe it's true a lot of times. No, I believe it's true. This part I believe it's true. No one play, I think, loses a game. There's all a bunch of plays that lead up to it, so you get to look at it. But also, it's true in the sense that not only for the season, but in this game, Michigan in '93 wouldn't be where they were without Chris Webber, number one.
Oh no, and he was 100%, best player coming out of college. People couldn't wait for him to go declare for the draft, and I remember like thinking, he was going to be the number one pick. Like, he was an amazing player from day one at Michigan. You know what I mean? Like, he was doing stuff as a power forward / center. I know Juwan Howard's more like a center, but with stuff Weber was doing, man, I was like, this dude is like a different level. You know what I'm saying? Like, I had never seen a power forward do the things he was doing, pushing the ball up the court, throwing no-look passes, throwing passes behind his back through his legs. Like, he was doing some stuff, man, and he was a power dunker. He had it all. You know what I mean? Like, he was the prototypical power forward, and he will let you know about it. And I think also, like, that, them being so brash, like you talked about, Deremy, and in your face and always talking shit, like, I think, like, elevated this mistake even more. You know what I'm saying?
I think so, yeah.
Because now people were like, oh, he was talking shit to us the whole year. Now we got something on him, and they were really pushing that in his face. So, yeah, it's a shame. I have my bone to pick with another Fab Five player in this game, but we can do that while we're watching the game.
Well, let's hit play. Let's do this rewatch here, man.
Yeah, I mean, again, one of my favorite games of all time. I remember watching this, and I know me, you talk about this all the time. We mentioned it on the show. I was a big Carolina fan at this time of my life. George Lynch was my guy. So,
well, that's the interesting thing. It's always fun to hear about the contrast. So going into this game, there's a lot of talks. Weber shoots that three and misses it. But there's a lot of talks because there's the Fab Five and their, street ball, running the gun kind of play against that traditional Carolina, very disciplined, not as athletic type of a team. So a lot of people were looking at that as, the contrast in styles. And it's still also Dean Smith you're looking at this time. He's going in with one national title. Yeah. So they're saying he needs this. He needs another one to kind of really cement himself as a legend. And also, the Fab Five needed this after their loss to Duke. And Steve Fisher, he won in '89, but he kind of coached them just for the tournament. So then it's like, could he say, hey, he deserved to be there. He wins. He's there for the whole season, and he wins the national title. So a lot of interesting storylines going into this game back then.
Right, a lot of pressure on both teams, I would say, Darren. It was like a lot of pressure, even when they right before jump off, like, they were saying George Lynch, the quote George Lynch was saying is, we want to win this with Dean Smith, and like the players knew how important it was to Coach Smith. Obviously, everyone else knew about it, so there was a lot of pressure. But as you can see, and if you're just listening on the podcast, man, like North Carolina this season, where they were great defensively. They had a lot of really good defensive players on the perimeter, inside with Montrose, and here they put a lot of pressure on Michigan, and especially like Jaden Rose. Anytime they came up past half court, they were trying to trap, and they were just playing nonstop, like pressure defense on Michigan.
And also with Carolina, remember 91, 92, Duke is back-to-back champs, so that's added pressure.
Right.
That Dean Smith and Carolina, they ran the ACC, they ran the state for all those years, and now Coach K, not only did he match Dean Smith, now he has at this point more titles than him. So exactly, and so it's really strong for Dean in North Carolina, and that's why this team. You have George Lynch, you got Eric Montross, you have Williams, you have Phelps. This group here is not a star-studded group like we've seen in past and then future Carolina teams here.
Right. No, I agree. This is the quintessential North Carolina Dean Smith. Like perfect. This is a perfect team for Dean Smith. Like no superstars, things like that he can just coach all these guys. Look easy to coach players. But this part of the game for me was very interesting, there. I mean, I wanted to ask you about it. So it's literally the game just started, and Michigan subbed Weber out. And even in the commentary, they were saying like they were trying to calm him down. He was too excited. He wasn't playing his normal self. I thought that was really interesting. Like even watching this back then, but definitely rewatching it, I was like, man, like I don't think I've ever seen that before. Like or after that, like a coach literally taking a player out for a couple minutes to calm him down. You know what I mean? And that's exactly what happened here. And you'll see they'll sub him right back in a minute or two. I just thought that was interesting.
No, I thought it was too. I think it's an interesting move. What it was also though, I think having a guy like Eric Riley, who was a good player, he was one of the stars on the team before the Fab Five comes in.
Right.
And so he's a veteran. The Fab, they're all sophomores this year. So
he was on
Eric
the
Riley
team, right?
Yeah, he was one of those guys. Him and Rob Pelinka, who's GM of the Lakers now. You'll see Rob Pelinka in there soon. So I think
all the attention's on Weber, and I just don't. I didn't get that.
I think to get him hyped up, I think he was also. There's a lot of talk about that matchup with Eric Montross, the big 7-footer, and there's talks of hey, they're trying to get some help, and Weber was saying he could handle him one-on-one. I think it was just they knew that they're going to need him too. And I do think that was something that I see. This is also one of those games that I loved watching all the time, back on ESPN Classic, even now with YouTube. And you see what people were saying going into the game to me was true. It was the athletic. I watched how athletic Michigan is compared to Carolina. It's no contest.
Yeah.
But the veteran leadership, the better team, the smarter team to me is North Carolina.
Yeah, hands down. I think, I like Steve Fisher, but this Carolina team is better coached. You know what I mean? Like they just did all the right plays. You know what I mean? Like when you got selfless guys like like Lynch and Montross, like you're going to have a lot of success.
And you see Weber back in with that jam, and I tell you, Jose, what gets lost in it, and what makes the legacy and honestly mysterious legacy of Chris Webber, because he's really kind of hard to rank. Especially Basketball Hall of Fame is not just your pro career. I believe if it was just pro career, I wouldn't put Chris Webber in the Hall of Fame. It's pro and college. So you look at what he did in his 2 years at Michigan. He's one of the more dynamic college basketball players we've ever seen.
Yeah, absolutely. And even in this game, as he goes here, he gets past under the rim, gets a dunk. Then he's walking up the court looking at Montross, just grilling him. I can't stand that though. And I like a guy that talks shit. But dude, you just had to come out the game real quick because whatever reason, man. Then you come in and get one dunk. then you're the shit again. But whatever. But I agree with you. I think he was one of the most dynamic players I've ever seen.
And I think it's interesting because, you could check our podcast archives. We did episodes on UNLV. We looked at 91 Duke UNLV. You have Larry Johnson a few years earlier, who he was dynamic. And I think Chris Webber comes in. He's a little bit bigger, and he's better than what Larry Johnson was. And people forget how dominant Larry Johnson was in college basketball.
Yeah, I just think you see there with those two guys, and as Carolina traps Jalen Rose, another turnover. And Weber was just, I think, the evolution. You know what I'm saying? Like of that new power forward that we're going to see in the NBA pretty soon. Like we got, like you talked about Larry Johnson, but you look at the NBA at this point, you got like guys like Malone and Barkley, like all these
Sean Kemp.
guys, Sean Kemp, like backing you down in the paint. Like Weber was the new prototypical type that they can run up and down the court, they can handle the ball. Eventually Weber becomes a pretty good shooter, from the outside, but he was playing above the rim at this point in time. Another block on Montrose. You got Weber, you got Garnett coming, like you got all these like super athletic power forwards. It just I like that comparison almost because it was just like just the evolution of the power forwards we're looking at here. That was a nice play, out of bounds play.
Great out of bounds play, lob to George Lynch. George Lynch, who was a steady pro for a while, good defender, hard working guy, and that's what you see here. It's just the way Carolina played, and I think that's one of the unsung travesties of what happens at the end of the timeout. Dean Smith has a lot of great coached games, but really should be a highlight of Dean Smith's career is his second national title with this workman-like team, right, beating the mighty Fab Five. And I feel like the way this team played, the way he coached, it was such a great performance, and it's overshadowed by Weber's timeout. But this should be talked about because in '82 when Dean won, that was a stacked team.
Yeah.
They're number one the whole year. It's loaded. This wasn't the case with this '93 Carolina team.
Yeah, I think they finished ranked 7th in the country, I believe.
6 or 7, something like that.
Yeah, they were a 1 seed, but yeah, I agree. This is not like the Dean Smith. Even like you talked about past and like in the future, like coming up, these next couple Dean Smith teams are stacked again. You know what I'm saying? Like next, you're going to get that Stackhouse, Rasheed Wallace, like that coming up. That team was stacked. They were a great team. So that's what you're more used to. This team here, it's like again, like just guys who are. Yeah, that's a nice fast break, man.
Yeah, Rob Pelinka, future GM right there with another 3. Rob Pelinka from Michigan.
He could definitely shoot though, for sure.
Yep.
He was like their fully only shooter.
Really, yeah. And we see this.
Go ahead, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Deremy.
No, I was just saying this backcourt of Phelps, Donald Williams, and he's a name that you're going to hear a lot for Carolina tonight, and he winds up being, most outstanding player for him. He has a great game.
He's a great shooter. You know what I mean? He was always a really, really good shooter. But this game, yeah, he was lights out. And this is the guy here, like Jalen Rose. Like I used to like him as a player, but he did not have a good game. He just made that 3, but he finished with like 4 assists and like 6 turnovers. I think that Carolina pressure really bothered him.
And I think Jalen Rose has said later on in defense of Weber in the timeout, is not just him. He said he had his worst game of the year this night, and he did.
He did, yeah.
And Weber gets that bucket, this physical, but he's always talking, and that's, Jose. We've kind of alluded this in the past, I guess, but haven't really, because this is really the first episode featuring the Fab Five that we've done. So we've talked college basketball, but geez, Montrose missed a dunk, but it went in.
It went in though, yeah.
Montrose, but a lot of people, and I think especially with the 30 for 30, the Fab Five has talked about like what they brought to basketball and the change in the culture and all that stuff. I want to know what do you think about that? About like the attention bigger than the games. We talk about legacy, but a lot of times I feel like, especially in the past decade, due to Jalen Rose, Juwan Howard's coaching, that 30 for 30, they're saying that they kind of transitioned. They brought in the new wave, that hip hop mixing with college basketball, and they kind of brought it into the mainstream. Like, do you agree with that? Disagree?
I 100% agree with that. Because again, if you look at, from and it's, it's been documented from like the bald heads as we're looking at Weber at the free throw line. You know, black socks, baggy shorts, all that stuff. Like that all came from that hip hop culture, and it's just like, especially at this time, you're talking what, 92, 93, excuse me, and that's what was in. You know what I'm saying? And we weren't seeing a lot of that, especially in college basketball, but for sure in the NBA. But in college basketball, we were not seeing that. We were looking at teams like Duke and Carolina and Kentucky, like, who was coming back at this point and like, just playing the right way and making that extra pass and things like that. But Michigan came in with this Fab Five, and that all changed. You know what I'm saying? Like, and this was more like playing above the rim and just looking like you're playing street ball and looking like you're at your local park, man, playing ball in the park. And I can remember being very young at this time, but this was what I was a fan of this Fab. Like, you couldn't. How can you not be a fan of the Fab Five at this time? And it was just like watching them play, and it was like, I feel like I know these guys. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like I know these guys from the neighborhood. And they to me, they brought a lot of that to the court. They brought a lot of that brash cockiness, in your face, talking shit to you. Like, people like watching that, man, and I know I enjoy watching that.
No, I find it interesting because I think what I look at with them, definitely baggy shorts. Got to give it like fully embracing, fully baggy, and I'll always thank Jalen Rose and Fat Five for that, because I don't know how people felt comfortable even playing in those shorts back in the day. So I'll always be thankful for these guys for that. And I'll give them this. Now we're used to it. Power teams, especially with the one and done rule. You see like a lot of multiple freshmen playing, starting. It was unique to see five freshmen. The thing was, freshmen, hey, you might get one guy if he's a star playing, but you didn't have a group of freshmen out there. So I'll give them that. I always just kind of felt like they're getting this resurgence and this popularity boost, but I'm like, they're the sons of Georgetown.
Oh yeah,
They're the sons of UNLV. And if you watch Georgetown in the 80s with Patrick Ewing and that team, John Thompson, you're seeing very much the same kind of thing that they're doing, almost a decade later. If you're watching early 90s UNLV, it's the same kind of thing. And the difference is those teams were champions.
right.
These guys aren't. And so that's why I, I don't knock it, but I kind of do, because I feel like a lot of stuff goes to the Fab Five that I think, like, college basketball, college sports was already kind of going this way
Right.
a while before this group here.
Right, because you had the University of Miami doing stuff, in college football. I agree. I think what Georgetown started, right, what UNLV continued, and then these guys picked it up after UNLV, and then kind of like continued with it. But I agree, 100%. They didn't win. They didn't win it. Those other teams, people hated them, people feared them, but they won. You know what I'm saying? Like, and there was, UNLV dominated, Georgetown dominated, like, and then UNLV should have won back to back, and they didn't. We got, Coach K and all, and Christian Laettner are a big reason for that. But this team was close twice, and then it came up short. You know what I'm saying? Like, so you can talk all the shit you want. You can talk about what trends you brought to the leagues and stuff like that, which they did. But you got to win it. You know what I'm saying? Like, and if you don't win it, it still means something. because it meant something for me. Like as a kid, growing up in the inner city, watching these guys, it was fun as hell to watch them play. But you gotta win it. You know what I'm saying? Like you can't come up short, and they came up short twice.
It's interesting. It's a group of guys. They did not win a conference tournament, I don't believe.
I don't
So that
think so.
yeah,
They
so
lost
that's
to this season. It wasn't
so
Ohio
it.
State, right? No.
No, I don't think Ohio State '93, maybe, but they weren't. They never were a conference champion. I always think about Bobby Knight. I think it was in that the documentary on 91, 92 Duke when he was like he called them the most overrated team,
Yeah.
and never has a team been praised so much for doing so little. I was like, geez, that's a shot, And I can't stand Bobby Knight, but I was like, I'm like, he's not totally off.
Didn't they beat Indiana though in the tournament? Michigan.
What, this year?
Yeah.
Did they beat him in '93? I know '92 Duke beat Indiana in the Final Four.
Final Four, yeah.
I don't know if they did it in '93. Who knocked him out? That's a good question.
Yeah, I have it up. Indiana was number 1 too.
So they probably didn't beat him.
Kansas beat him, yeah. In the Elite Eight.
So Michigan beat Temple. I know that this year.
Yeah, that was a rough one.
And they beat Kentucky. They beat
which is
Jamal Mashburn.
Their best game, I think. Like as a unit, with that Kentucky game, I think that was their best game ever. This Fab Five game.
That's interesting. Okay.
Because I know that Duke game the season before when it was like their coming out party, whatever, they played really well. But that Kentucky game, that was their best game.
I was thinking of that. I was thinking of the Ohio State game in '92 when they beat Jim Jack. I'm not saying a joke because you're Ohio State fan. I thought that was a really impressive because they struggled against Ohio State that year, and in the Elite Eight to get that win, I thought that was pretty big.
Yeah, and they beat Cincinnati too. If I'm not mistaken.
In '92.
No, 92. I thought they did it. They did in '92. Didn't they play them in a tournament? Cincinnati.
I think so. So it was just interesting to kind of see because that's what lures over this game, and I do think the point you made earlier, the dislike that people had for the Fab Five really played into a lot of the media, a lot of people really rubbing in that timeout and the fact that, hey, 2 years. Also, I think it was out there that, hey, especially for Weber, the others, you weren't sure about Jawan, Jalen. It was like, yeah, he needs to come back. But it was like, C-Webb needs to go. He's the projected number 1 pick. He should be going.
So let me ask you a question, Deremy. Say Michigan wins this game.
Mm-hmm.
Can you put them up with the Georgetowns and UNLVs at that point?
No. I mean, they would be. I would still say they were not as good as them.
Yeah, I don't think they were as good as them.
Those other teams dominated from start to finish.
Right.
Hell, UNLV, when they won it. The NCAA was down their neck so much they didn't have their 5. Everybody gets suspended that year, and they're still winning games because the NCAA. Hey, Stacey Augmon said in warm-ups they say suspended. The NCAA actively gunning for you, and then you still go on that 45-game win streak. You have an undefeated year. The NCAA didn't want you to even play the tournament in '91 to repeat, but they said, fine, we'll ban you the next year. You had the most dominant national championship win still to this day in '90 with the UNLV team. So it's like you just see the dominance here. You see what Georgetown in those back-to-back years did. If Michigan gets this win, Michigan never was dominant like that.
I agree.
In their time. So I think, people would hype that. The hype would be crazy, especially looking at it now that the Fab Five, the doc was so big, Jalen's on TV, C-Web was on TV. So the comparisons would be through the roof. It'd be wrong. They're not better than the back-to-back Duke teams if they win this one. They're still not better than them.
No. Hell no, they're not.
So but the comparisons be through the roof. So no. Like I said, I can't stand Bobby Knight. I'll be quite honest. But if there's ever a quote he has said that I'm like, you're not off, Coach Knight, that one about this Fab Five team kind of was the closest. I was like, I could see it.
Yeah, and I remember when he said that, and I was like, what? And I was like, yeah. Like, holy shit. Like, yeah. Like, I totally get where he's coming from. But
and I think a lot of it is he doesn't like how they play. He doesn't like that they're showing attitude. Bobby Knight, he's the star. You shut up and play. He's a patent wannabe. So I think there's a lot of that bias in his comment too. But I do think there's a point. I don't know of a non-championship team more hyped in college basketball than the Fab Five.
Yeah, I don't either. Man, look at that. Triple team. North Carolina is playing some solid defense, but so is Michigan. This is a low-scoring game right now. Yeah, and Donald Williams.
Yeah, Donald Williams just balling this game. Balling throughout the whole tournament.
Yeah. Yeah, he just picked up on his own. Like, there was nobody there.
And it's 7:50 left in the first half, and it's 25 all. So it's just, man, you just look at it. It's workman guys for this Carolina team. Even their, George Lynch is a late first-round pick this year, 93.
Out a lot, like, until maybe when he started playing with the Sixers and stuff. I felt like.
Really, true. And then Eric Montross is a lottery pick the next year, 94. But it's now talk about a guy a lot of hype, and the thing is, I've met Eric Montross, and I can agree with what everyone has said. One of the nicest people you'll ever want to meet. But like a lot of people, like Duke fan, a lot of people did not like Eric Montross because he was just that big 7-foot white dude. But nice guy. But I'll give him this. In college, he was better than I thought. I'm in the 90s. I thought he got picked high because he's just 7 feet. But he was a better college player than I give him credit for.
Yeah, no, he was a decent player. He was a decent player for sure. You see here North Carolina going to the zone now, which I thought was a mistake, but they were really playing great man-to-man defense. Jimmy King hits that three.
But I think you have to mix it up a bit. I don't think you want to, because they are more athletic. So I think Dean's probably saying let's mix it up too, instead of trying to take them on.
Against this Michigan team, the zone is not a bad option. You know what I'm saying? Because they're not that they're like a terrible shooting team, but that's not their strength. Sullivan, the elbow jumper.
Sullivan reminded me of Harold Jensen in that '85 title game, Nova. Just out of nowhere hitting those jumpers.
Jalen had to shoot that.
Mm-hmm.
That's nice pass.
Yeah, Jimmy King. No, that's true. Like not a lot of maybe C-Web arguably the best shooter of the Fab Five. Not a lot of shooters on this Fab Five.
Nah, and that zone is now like they're getting open shots and they're just not hitting them. Another turnover for Michigan.
7 turnovers for Michigan, 3 for Carolina right here, and I think that's like the difference right there. It's the turnovers, and a lot of guys on this Carolina team, they're part of that '91 Final Four that they go to Final Four and lose to Kansas because we were lucky enough to finally have that matchup, Carolina-Duke 2022 in the Final Four. The last time it was that close was '91. Carolina didn't get the job done. Duke did, so Carolina didn't play them in the title game. So a lot of the guys on this team were there in '91. So there's some veteran experience for Carolina as well.
Yeah, that's big time in these tournament games, man. Because most of the time, it's that experience that gets you through, especially like if you have it in the backcourt. But this Michigan team is just that good, you know. They're really trying to feed Weber down low. They're like
Mm-hmm.
forcing it to him almost. He's got three guys on him. Nice pass. Yeah,
Wow. Nice reverse.
it was a nice move.
I know who that guy is for Carolina.
So he's the
But
only one.
what you're kind of seeing though is like honestly for this first half, it's really C Webb is the one really doing it for him
Yeah,
offensively.
yeah. There's a lot of running around at this point for both teams. Mm. If Carolina, if any of these teams hit any shots, man, they used to be a lot bigger of a lead, but they're just not making anything.
And I think
Good defense, though.
you see like it's a warm up period. It's a national championship game, and I think it's those big moments. And remember, these are young men. We know these guys now, grown, but they're anywhere from 18, 19, and 21. And I think you're seeing some nerves as well too. Ugly shot by Jalen
I
Rose.
know. On net, though.
Always, what's funny though is like Jalen Rose wasn't a bad player, but he's one of those guys where I feel like being in the media overhypes the playing career.
Yeah.
Where like people are saying like Jalen Rose how good he was and blah blah blah, but I'm like I don't know. And I love Jalen Rose now, so forgive me. I'm not trying to come at him. I'm like when he got some of those big contracts, especially like post like the Pacers, I thought he was stealing money so bad.
Yeah.
I was like Jalen Rose, come on man.
Yeah.
People were like Jalen how good he was.
Yeah. And he was like that, that big point guard that was also like starting to shift at this point in time. You got guys like, and I'm not comparing them, but you got like him, Jalen Rose, Penny Hardaway. Like, I'm definitely not comparing those two, but they're bigger point guards, and you know, Jason Kidd comes. You know what I mean? Like all these guys, and but Jalen Rose is not in that league.
Jalen Rose to me was always a guy who I'm never gonna say he showed talent, but he could never be consistent enough to be a lead guy for you.
Right.
So like as a secondary guy, not bad. Like Jalen Rose, when like especially when he was younger, you saw some like athletic ability, some talent, but he just was inconsistent. He was a hothead, and he couldn't put it together. Like those guys were guys who could lead the ship. Jalen Rose, that's why in Indiana it was nice. There's a lot of veteran guys. Reggie was the best player, and the pressure was off Jalen Rose. But I feel like now, like people are hyping him up more than what he was. Don't get me wrong; he had a nice long career in the
He had a
NBA,
long career. Yeah, I give him that.
but he was at best he was all okay. I never thought like Jalen could be this guy. Like I never saw it with Jalen Rose like
Because
that.
even on the Michigan team, I thought he was like third. You know what I mean? From like to like Weber
Yeah,
out, and I would say Jalen Rose.
and I think it showed because I think 4 of the 5 make it to the NBA. The only one for the Fab Five, only one is Ray Jackson, and Ray was he was a good workman, defensive player. Jimmy King played like a year in the pros. He was a good defensive player,
Yeah.
but like the other 3 were the guys.
Right. When you think about like, there's a lot of like conversation, especially this time, but then afterwards, during the 30 for 30, they talked about it with like what Ray Jackson and Jimmy King sacrificed being on this Fab Five team. Do you think if these guys go to different schools, I think Jimmy King was like highly recruited to go to Kansas. He was close to going to Kansas. If
Yeah,
they go to like Kansas, do they have better careers and do they become better players, or do you think like this is kind of like where they kind of plateaued?
I think this is where it's at. I think this is where it's at because I also think, I mean, well, Jimmy King, if Kansas was a Final Four team in this era, Yeah, they went to the Final Four this year. So
Yeah,
I think it's interesting if he went there, but I think you kind of see it with Jimmy King and Ray Jackson. Like, I think they were smart to team up. Honestly, I don't think they were carrying the load. Yeah, they went to like a school, like I hate to say, like a Temple or something like that, maybe. But like for like these major programs, I don't think like they're leading Kansas to the national title with Ray Jackson or Jimmy King. I think this was kind of smart, and I think for their careers, I think this gave them more exposure as well.
right. I think Jimmy King more than Ray Jackson. I think Jimmy King was a better player. I think maybe, but yeah, I agree. I don't know. I think if they were that good, it would have showed post, you know, college. You know what I'm saying? Like, if they were both that good, they would have became really good NBA players. Just then you can know at that point, like, they just needed an opportunity. They got the opportunity, and the best they can do is play overseas. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, because I think we've seen it. The one thing about scouting in the NBA is they're looking at the athletes first.
yeah,
So if even if you aren't getting the highest averages, I think if Jimmy King showed like he's that kind of freak athlete that is in there,
right. Like
then
he's
it's like
talking
we
about.
right. Like if we showed that, I think you would see it more. But I think it wasn't that. I think we've seen it where guys there's certain, especially even as the years have gone on, where I'm like, really, like they scouted him like that, and to put him there. Like you look at the North Carolina, George Lynch was not this lottery pick kind of guy, but I think George Lynch showed like, yeah, who would be the better pro, him or Jimmy King? It was George Lynch. Even in this game, like George Lynch is doing all those other things that like you would value on a team more.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, just in that 30 for 30, the way he was talked about, we thought he was, you know what I mean, like some great player that took a back seat to these other good players, and it hurt his career. And it's just like I don't like that might have been true coming out of high school, but again, like if that was the case, I think he would have panned out somewhere else. You know,
No, I think the sacrifice was like a Chris Riley. Like
right?
those guys, they stayed when these freshmen came in and these cocky freshmen came in. They stayed and they could have like transferred out. I think that's the sacrifice I look at.
Yeah, because he would have been starting. You know,
Mm-hmm.
Riley would have been starting. So yeah, because even Jimmy King was 6'5". Ray Jackson was 6'6". So they had good size, but if at that size, if they're playing the two, you need to be a little quicker. And I don't think Ray Jackson was that. Didn't have that quickness to guard those twos.
No,
And when
no.
he had the size, at this point, like these small forwards now are starting to really, really come in and do a lot of damage, right? You talked about Mashburn in Kentucky, the 6'8" guys like that can take you down low and still shoot over you and stuff like that. Like, you got Grant and Hill, you got all these guys coming in now. Like, if you're playing small forward, you need to
Right.
have some size too. And they didn't have any of that.
Well, you mentioned Grant Hill, and it's funny because I feel like later, like I feel like honestly, the next year, which was his senior year at Duke, 93, 94, he was the all everything guy.
Right.
The first, especially his first 2 years, or even like part of his third year, he was very unselfish. He was on a great team. Everyone knew what Grant Hill was, though.
Yeah.
Everyone saw Grant Hill's talent.
Once they saw him catch that alley oop from half court, they were like, yeah.
Even that confirmed it that freshman year, 91 against Kansas. But throughout the year, the best player was later. The most talented was Grant. Like I believe, like that talent show. You don't have to get 25 a night to be like, wow, you see that talent, and that's just why I feel like Ray Jackson, especially at Jimmy King. Like Juwan Howard did not get big numbers at Michigan,
Right.
but you saw what Yeah, you saw what Juwan Howard brought, and like, oh, you wanted Juwan Howard, you know.
Donald Williams, another one. So it's 43 seconds left in the first half, and Carolina got as big as lead, 42-36. Now they're starting to make a few shots now.
But I look at it, and this is one thing, and I'll give it to Coach K. And it's funny, we've been talking about coaches, and friend of the show, Jack Silverstein, he messaged you about our Andy Reid episode and the Andy Reid Belichick talk, and it was good. We love Jack. It was good conversation, but I feel like John Wooden's got 10 titles, Coach K got the 5, but because of the era Coach K coached in, many call him the GOAT now, greatest college coach of all time. But what I'll give it, Dean Smith, I think who had guys ready for the NBA better than Dean Smith did. And to me, just looking at and there's not a lot of NBA guys out there, but just how well they played, how disciplined, how fundamentally sound. That's one of the many things I'll give Dean Smith that I think people don't talk about. He gets a lot of praise, but Dean Smith will have you ready. Yep. I think obviously for life, but even just for basketball, it's no surprise that you look at all these guys who were stars at Carolina, and George Lynch is one of them, could go into the NBA and be a good role player and fit right in there. And we had a long stretch where Duke guys couldn't do that.
Right. And this was the stretch here. Like all the great Duke teams they had. I think that Elton Brand team is the one that kind of broke that a little bit. Nice little touch shot like Montrose.
And they kind of suffered though too.
Yeah.
Because that 99 Duke team, Elton Brand was like a stud player in the NBA. But then, Trajan Langdon, no. Maggette, he got hurt, but he didn't,
but Maggette looked like he was on his way, and he came out as a freshman. That was out of Duke, that was not heard of. I remember him coming out. I was like, whoa, he's leaving already. Wow. I think he would have stayed one more year. I think it would have been much, much better for him.
He was a freak of nature.
Yeah, he was a great athlete, yeah.
Corey Maggette was something. He reminded me like of Vince.
Whoa.
I didn't say he was better than Vince. He just reminded Vince was that freak of nature in Carolina. Corey Maggette had some freakish things when he was at Duke.
He was an athlete, man. He was definitely playing above the ring.
Yeah, he's not better than Vince Carter, but he was to me Duke's answer for Vince Carter.
Because they didn't have a lot of that in Duke.
No.
He was that real first one I can remember. And then obviously after that, then that kind of shifted a little bit. That shit out here. They D'ing up Montrose like crazy. That's his 5th shot and it's blocked on him already.
No, they're going for him. They're feeding. That's how the game has really changed. Look at how much they're feeding that game. They're feeding the big man inside there for Carolina.
Yeah, it is again. He swung that ball 80 miles an hour.
Yeah, he whipped it out there.
Yeah, but Carolina's trying to get inside now. I think that was the adjustment there, get Montrose the ball a little bit.
Mm-hmm. But just when I look at that possession here and how, like you said, Montrose, he was your boy Greg Maddux. He whipped it out there. But then you see how the other guys on the perimeter, how they're moving without the ball, spreading, opening up the lane to feed it right back into Montrose. That's huge right there. And that's the way what I'm not seeing as much with Michigan. And don't get me wrong, I like Steve Fisher. I think he gets what happened at Michigan afterwards. He gets knocked. You could make a case he's a Hall of Fame coach, really,
right? He had
for what he's done.
At San Diego State too.
Yeah. So you can say a lot of stuff about him, but you just look at the difference and just how Dean's team is playing, and when I look at Michigan on offense, it's a lot of confusion.
Right. I mean, because they're doing, and I caught that Maddox thing. Don't think I can catch that. It's what they're doing is they're forcing them to beat them. They're like, all right, if you're going to beat us, you're not beating us with Weber. And as you can see, they're collapsing on Weber. They got 4 guys on them. Guys got to make shots. And in this game, they fail to do that. I mean, I think it's a simple defensive strategy. Like, let's take away their best player. You know what I'm saying? Like, and force Jalen Rose to make some jump shots and some 3-pointers. Jimmy King, Ray Jackson. Like, let's see if you can beat us shooting from outside, then we'll take that loss. Like,
and I think
whoever kill us.
And part of me wants to know also, knowing how sly Dean Smith was. Not only that I'm not going to say Michigan wasn't mentally tough, but I felt like Michigan sometimes, when the going could get tough with this squad, they could get frustrated very quickly too.
So to me, they weren't mentally tough, in my opinion.
Okay, I hear you. No, so you feel like that was that part of the strategy? You think?
No, I don't think that's what he was trying to get to, but I think you can frustrate this team really easy. You know what I'm saying? Like, and especially Weber and Jalen Rose. But number one, Weber, you can frustrate Weber big time. And if you start taking him away a little bit, he'll start to get frustrated. And I think even in this game, he doesn't show that frustration, but you can see, like, if you look at it now, if you look, there's 3 guys there. You know, you got Lynch, Montross, and it's a good size too. It's not like just 3 regular dudes, and it's just like they're denying that ball. They're denying Weber to get the ball, and I think it was a smart strategy.
Well, it's smart, but I look at what Michigan's doing to counter that, and I feel like hey, props to Weber, but you see Weber. I don't know if you saw that last clip, Jose, how tired he looked.
Yeah,
and we got
like crazy. Yeah,
we 16 and a half minutes left in the second half, and they're making him work, and he's right. Balling. He's the reason why they're in this game. But I mean, they're making him work, and to me, it's like save him. That dumb substitution in early, sub him out and get rest him up and try to get an offense going here.
Right, because they're making him work both sides. You know what I mean? Like they got. Again, I wouldn't put him on Montross either. Like I think that was another mistake. Like cause they're going right at Weber. Not that he's like a liability defensively, because at this point, Weber was blocking a lot of shots, man. But he's getting pounded. Look, he took a big shot there.
He's on the ground. He's hurting.
Right, he's hurting. He took a shot right to the face, and again, like he's dealing with a much bigger guy, heavier guy. Montross is a big dude. You know what I'm saying? Like, so keep pounding inside, and then now you got to go offensively and really work to get in position and get the ball. And then when you do get the ball, you got 3 guys around you. That takes a lot out of you, man. And in fairness, he has a great game, so that just speaks to how phenomenal Weber was.
But I think it's something that's not talked about, like. Is and we know why to an extent, like what happens at the end. Look at young Kareem, young Abdul-Jabbar, but it's just like who really helped him out in this game. And like you said, Jalen Rose, the turnovers, big shot by Ray Jackson there, but it was streaky shots by everyone else in the Fab Five.
I was going to say that was a nice move. He's got the mustache going.
Mm-hmm.
Got Isaiah with the
wow.
suit on.
Isaiah's, I think he's retiring like that next year.
Yeah.
Like 93, 94 is Isaiah's like final run there.
Yeah, because he blows his Achilles right that year.
Yeah. Then Pistons get Grant Hill.
Yeah.
So. It's interesting to see this.
There you go. That's what he needs to do a little more. Just be a little more aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, like everything we were saying about Jalen Rose, he's got a really good size, to play point. But he can definitely get in there, and that's good D. There you go.
Look at that steal by Weber.
He couldn't even catch Weber.
Weber was such a freak. That's what makes this hard. Is he was one of the guys who was like the one, And it's hard, because he did not have a bad career by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah, he was a first team All NBA guy in the best as a power forward in the best era of power forwards in NBA history.
Yeah.
He didn't have a bad career. I don't know if it was just he had so much hype he couldn't live up to, but then it was just things about Chris Webber from this game on that just kind of hovered over him, and he just couldn't get it rolling. It seems sometimes.
And he had a weird career. You know what I'm saying? Like
very weird.
He had a good career, but it was weird. Like he gets drafted, he goes to Washington. He gets drafted by Orlando. They make the trade and stuff like. Oh no,
to Golden State.
Golden State. So he gets drafted by Golden State. Then he goes to Washington
after a year in Golden State.
Right, and it's like someone that you draft him that high and immediately gets moved, and then from Washington, that's when he goes to the Kings, right? So he's played so many teams to be such a great player. It's like you don't think that a guy with his stature, he came out with a lot of hype, and you talked about it, deservedly so. He had a great college career, but to him to get moved so much so early was weird to me.
And it just followed. He clashed with Don Nelson, and that's where they let him go from there. You look at it, he has to highlight that behind the back dunk on Barkley.
Great play.
But then, Barkley gets him back in the first round, and he goes to Washington, and they don't quite.
It's got him and Wallace.
Yeah, he's hurt a lot. Jawan comes though and joins him.
Yeah.
It's like. But they kind of get to the playoffs, I think, once or twice, but they're out in the first round. I know the Bulls beat them one year in the first round. It doesn't click, and then he does go to Sacramento, and that is like a wake up, And it's funny because what he will be forever known as a Sacramento King, and he did not want to go there. They traded him, and I believe they traded him because Sacramento was such like a cow town, a waste, you go there to end your career. And Washington was so fed up with him, we're going to screw you. We're trading you to Sacramento. And it wound up being the best thing for his career, but he didn't want to go there.
Yeah. And one thing I'll give Chris Webber credit is, and they're going to that zone again, but he changed his game too. Like once some of the injuries started to happen, he changed his game and became more of like an outside shooter and a really good outside shooter. I'm not saying he was shooting threes, but he had a nice mid-game range, and you can do pick and roll with, him and Peja or him and Bibby or whoever, and he can pop and just hit a nice wide open jump shot. So I'll give him credit there.
Yeah, and one of the best passing big men we've seen. Yeah. Yep. And maybe of a big man, you could say he's up there top 2, 3 best hands we've seen of a big guy, Chris Webber.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. A little heated there.
Little heated. It's been a little bit since I watched. This is a game, Jose, that on ESPN Classic I used to watch all the time, and they always showed it. And it's been about a few years since I watched this game, but it's one of those ones I always watched. And it is a great it's one of those classic games. It's not 92 Kentucky Duke, but what is? But it's a great back and forth game. It's up there with 91 Duke UNLV.
Yeah, it's a lot of intensity, man. Again, because you can't make any mistakes. That's a nice move, but couldn't finish.
Yeah. I like to see just also how physical the refs are letting them be in this title game too.
Yeah. A lot of missed shots though.
Yeah, it's a little some ebbs and flows of some sloppy play out there.
And this is I think also a big problem what Michigan was facing, where they were not a deep team. You know what I mean? Like you had Riley, you had Pelinka, and that was it on the bench. At least Carolina can throw a lot of bodies at you. So games like this intense, man, like this physical, starting those guys and playing those guys a lot of minutes, man, like that. When you talk about Webber looking already tired with most of the half to go, you start to see this now start to wear on them a little bit, and start to miss a lot of shots and even more turnovers. So that was another knock on this Michigan team. They were not deep at all.
Mm-mm.
I'll say this though, this might be the best Carolina jersey. I love this. I love this jersey.
You love this version of the jersey?
I do. I love it.
I love Carolina. I never really thought about this one as my favorite one, but I don't feel like you can go back to the '60s. There's no bad Carolina jersey. This is a fact. It is my Carolina blue is my favorite color. People ask me who don't know anything about sports which favorite color Carolina blue, and they look at me. I go, just look it up and come back to me.
I do the same thing. I'm like, did you paint it? Oh, is that Carolina blue? Carolina blue. Yeah, just Google it. Like you'll know what I'm talking about. You mean baby blue? No. It's Carolina blue.
Yep, Carolina blue. My brother went to Carolina basketball camp.
Nice.
Right the first year, I think it was the first year of Bill Guthridge. So right after Dean had, so he has a picture with Dean Smith and Bill Guthridge. But what was cool was he came back with these. They were like the Spalding basketballs, but they were blue and white. They had the Carolina blue and white.
Okay.
And we had like 4 or 5 of them. And we just, I was a kid. You're using them. So you're just playing. And then I so regret not just keeping one and just like preserving it because it was just so cool. But I was like, man, I took that ball. I was dribbling everywhere all summer long. Just that Carolina blue and white, just going everywhere, dribbling, walking it all over, just playing with that.
Yeah, I was a huge fan, man. I had Vince Carter's jersey, Carolina jersey, and Jameson's jersey. I love that team.
Yeah, that team disappointed.
Yeah, I know. And that Stackhouse, Rasheed Wallace, and we talked about this in many episodes. Like the Philly connection with Rasheed was a big deal to me too. And I remember hearing like when Dean came and recruited him, his grass was not that far from where I grew up at.
Dean recruits Rasheed Wallace the next day after this game.
Ah, that's right. Yeah.
He goes from New Orleans to Philadelphia, right? That shows dedication. After winning the national title, but Rasheed Wallace is that kind of recruit, like you go after.
Yeah.
But you just look at.
Carolina's doing such a great job mixing. That was a good point earlier, like mixing up their defenses, and it's just throwing Michigan all out of whack. They're leaving them open to shoot. They're missing wide open jump shots. Oh, they got Salvadorian now.
Salvador coming in for Big Montross. It just goes to show you, though, that's one thing I feel like Dean doesn't get the credit for is you just saw he had his guys ready to play.
Yeah.
And I think, you heard about Michael. The only guy to keep Michael under 20 was Dean Smith. But the one thing about it is I don't think Michael would have been great no matter where he went. I do believe that. But I think, like, why Michael was the greatest is because Dean Smith was his college coach.
Yeah.
And not only did Michael have the athletic ability, why he was dangerous right out the gate is because you had athletic ability with the proper fundamentals preached into him and worked into him by Dean Smith.
Yeah, to start your career that way, it's huge. If he would have went to another school and just was scoring 28 a game in college, like that would have just continued in the NBA. And just been even more selfish. I know Mike was selfish early on, but can you imagine if he had no discipline and you know what I'm saying, like, and just jumped into the league? It would have been.
Oh, for sure. I have said it, and people may want to disagree with me right now. The reason why Michael is better, I rank him higher than Kobe or LeBron, is Dean Smith.
That makes sense to me.
I think that's those guys came from high school. They didn't have that. Michael, if Michael goes to another school, Michael plays. Michael's with Jim Boeheim. No offense to Jim Boeheim. I don't know. He's still an all-time great, but maybe he's not. Maybe we're like Kobe's better than him. LeBron. I think the full package, a big deal. Dean Smith, having 3 years with Dean Smith is what puts him over the edge, in my honest opinion.
No, that's a good point though. Yeah, because if even either of those two guys come in the league with them also like a year or two in college, man, that would have been. There we go. That's a nice play.
Great lob to Weber right there.
Yeah, great high low. Two big guys. Howard's another good passing big man as well. So you can do a lot with those two guys. Michigan takes the lead. They haven't had the lead all half. So at this
So they
point,
show some fight here.
right? I remember watching this and I was like, all right, this is where Michigan is going to like push and take over the game. They don't.
So is your comment about Michigan's lack of mental toughness, is that strictly on the timeout at the end, or is there other things that you feel like that they lack the mental toughness?
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's tough to say too because they're so young. But I think they're just like easily rattled. You know what I mean? Like, and you can see like when Duke, the one thing
Oh,
Duke wanted to do was just get in their heads, and they did exactly that. And it's not it's not cool. Like if you want to just fight everybody on the court, like that's not going to work. You know what I'm saying? Like you gotta somehow keep your cool a little bit. Now, when I was young, I was like, oh yeah, this is great. But knowing what I know now, it's like you can't win like that. You know what I'm saying? Like so, it's when things don't go their way. I think they're easily rattled, and easily frustrated. And again, I know they're a young team, but man, we're just talking about great. I mean, Jimmy King, and he can't even get past whoever that was. Um, but yeah, I just think they're easily like rattled, all of them as a group. But when your main guys are like that, that's a problem.
is that something that you think Steve Fisher should have done a better, or do you think no matter who they were playing for, they were going to be like that? Or do you think Steve Fisher should have? I know we talk about letting players be themselves, but you can also harness
Right.
that too. Do you think that's a Steve Fisher thing, or that's who these guys were?
I think it's a not to not to answer it this way. I think it's a little bit of both. You know what I'm saying? Like I think it's their personality, but I think he let their personalities run a little wild. You know what I'm saying? Like he didn't, like you said, he didn't kind of like calm that down. And I think if those guys are playing for Dean, we were just talking about that, just to use that example and analogy. Like I don't think that happens as much. I'm not saying they don't get frustrated. I don't say you don't see it on the court, but I didn't see one guy in Carolina this game look frustrated or just out of whack. And I know they're like an older team and stuff, but this is a physical game. You know what I'm saying? Like, and they're both getting
Mm-hmm.
beat up. Excuse me, and it's not happening. But with Michigan, you can see like the frustration is growing. If they're not scoring, if they're not like, if they're not getting fast break points, if it's like a half court game, it's frustrating to them. And I look at the coach, but I think it's just the type of team they have.
Yeah, it's real interesting because there is a balance to it.
Yeah.
You look at what Coach K did just the previous two seasons before. There's personalities with Leitner, with Bobby Hurley, Brian Davis, and he let them be themselves. But he had to harness that fire. Coach K said about it, coaching Leitner, this guy had a fire, and either you could use that fire to put heat throughout the whole building, or if you don't watch it, it could burn up the whole building, and you had to watch it. So I feel like that's what Steve Fisher had here, and I mean, they had success, 2 Final Fours, 2 title games. So you
Yeah.
can't say it burned up the building. But then again, maybe it did. I'll say this: the building didn't burn up, but they had to call the fire department. Smoke detectors went off sometimes.
Yeah. Somebody pulled the fire thing. Like, but they made it. They had a nice 2 years. But if you look at the talent on that team, and then you would say they definitely underachieved.
Especially because this was the year. 92,
Yeah.
92, that Duke team, they're not beating that Duke. I don't think this year they're beating that Duke
Nah,
team.
I don't think they
I don't
ever.
think 2 years from then,
I don't
they're
think
not
they're
beating
gonna
that.
ever. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
not gonna ever beat them. No. But this was the one. This was the one, and I
Hmm.
think they felt this pressure too.
And big shot by Jalen Rose right there. So despite, he's gaming in his own way. You know, he's not having the best game, but he made a big shot to put him up by 4. You know, they got about 5 minutes left in this game.
Yeah, if I was Skip Bayless, I would have threw this game at his face too when he's calling him water pistol.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true.
Check these stats out, bud.
That's true. He could have got him with this one.
Nice shot.
Donald Williams, man.
He's not even hitting home.
No, just balling. He had 25 the Saturday night against Kansas.
Yep. Yeah, he had a great run.
Phelps. And they call him the heart and soul of the team, Phelps.
Yep.
For North Carolina. Not the biggest scorer, but did a lot of everything for him. So they said beforehand, Phelps, they were like, he could be the MVP for us and not score a point, which, you know.
Yeah, that's a compliment.
Yeah.
Carolina's back to the man-to-man. Nice shot.
There's your buddy, Jimmy King.
He's the one that called Leitner a bitch.
Yeah, he did.
30. What do you think about Leitner?
He did.
Bitch.
Yeah, he just a bitch. Even back then, though, like going into the 92 game, what do you think about Bobby Hurley? Young Jimmy King, overrated.
Yeah.
And after the game, after they won, Duke won, Bobby Hurley's like, I'm an overrated guy, I guess, with 2 national championships. And I'm like, geez.
Yeah. We can't say to that. He was right.
Yeah. I don't know how you call Bobby Hurley at Duke. I don't know how you can call him overrated.
Nah, he wasn't overrated. I was just about to say that. And Lynch, eating him up.
George Lynch he always had that D.
Wide open shot. Brent. They're running around, man, scrambling.
You're not seeing an offense.
Right, and this is where I look at Jalen Rose. Like, not even just like points, but it's just like you got to get control of this thing, man. And you know, they're just throwing passes around, and they're like out of sync and out of control.
My man Derek Phelps with that layup, give him the 1-point lead.
King, air ball.
Wow, air ball.
Wide open 3, shoots an air ball.
What's up with air balls for C-Webb? These guys, his teammates in key situations. You got Peja in 02 with the Kings, and Doug Christie can't hit nothing. 93 title game, Jimmy King can't hit nothing. Jeez. Nothing but air.
The Dean going 4 corners on him.
That's why it's good to talk about it, because I feel the timeout just overshadows. This is a masterful game plan, and I mean, the players played it, but Dean Smith, this might be, and, you know, some people may give it, you know, some game in the 70s and, you know, probably that game where they're down by 8 with like 50 seconds left to Duke. That's a great coaching performance too. But this is one of Dean's best coaching jobs, what he did in this game. It's just masterful.
Yeah, because Michigan was obviously favored in this game, and everyone knew Michigan was winning this game and they were going to win their title. And he locked them down. You know what I mean? Like, as good as the game Weber had, like, he let everyone – he took Weber out of the game still.
Mm-hmm. He made Weber work. He tired out their best player.
Yeah.
George. North Carolina up 3. 2 minutes left in the game. Look at 70-67. Carolina.
So now they're playing a 1-3-1 zone.
Look at that, just mixing it up on them.
Yeah.
This is a clinic right here, Jose.
It is.
Dean.
Yeah, 3 guys on Weber. They're forcing you to shoot the ball, and these guys can't shoot. And then now you can put a couple big guys in the front court and kind of like match up on Weber when these guys are not able to make shots. Like, I'm not sure. I would have had Pelinka out there, but I know defensively he's a liability. But You got to do something out there, man.
I agree. I think Pelinka is the guy you got to have down the stretch here. But he was rolling with his Fab Five, Steve Fisher.
Yeah, and ain't nothing wrong with that.
But I'm with you though. I think Rob Pelinka would have been the right, at least to mix it up here in this down this stretch time. Not, and depending on how hot he is, you keep him out there, but you're not keeping this Carolina defense honest. Look at Donald Williams breaking out of that after getting that turnover there. Dumb foul.
That frustrated foul. Again, this is where I point at like the mental toughness. Bad turnover, comes down the court, takes a stupid foul.
That's a dumbass foul. Oh, you see Weber calling a timeout. I'm sorry, I hate to say it, but it's foreshadowing.
Yeah.
So a minute 18 left. Carolina up by 3, 70-67.
This 7-0 run. Jim Nance, young Jim Nance.
This is his third Final Four.
So he's actually got timeouts, 3 timeouts for UNC. Did I say 4 for Michigan or 1? I think that was fouls. Never mind.
Yeah, that was fouls.
I think it's 1 apiece timeouts. Possession arrow for North Carolina.
Did Michigan don't have one more officially?
Yeah.
One more timeout here. Yeah.
Carolina keeping the ball. Good D.
And them smart to move the ball. Talley was another guy who was an older guy before the Fab Five came in for Michigan. Here's where coaching is interesting because you think about, hey, getting guys ready to practice. So you think about drawing up plays, running and getting your shots in, running up and down, all that stuff. But it is situational moments you have to practice them. Who knows? I don't know, but I wonder how often Michigan practiced and Steve Fisher and the guys went over situational moments like this. Because if I'm watching them right now, Jose, they don't feel comfortable in these moments. They look like they don't know what they're doing.
Right.
Before we get to what happens with C-Web. And they're down by 5 now with 50 seconds left, 72-67 Carolina. Big shot by Ray.
Yeah.
Hit that 3.
I didn't understand why they were fouling there, though.
Why Michigan was?
Yeah.
I guess to try to get the...
It was over a minute left.
I guess to try to get the ball back. They were down 3, I guess. Dean was holding that ball, so I think trying to set it up. I don't understand that quite either, but I think, Dean was going to hold that ball. Oh.
Foot on the line. Timeouts. 1 for UNC, 0 for Michigan.
Remember that, people. 0 for Michigan.
Yeah, look at that. Carolina playing aggressive D, only committing 3 fouls. So now here. Oh, he stepped on the line. That's right. I forgot about that. Yeah, that was good defense. Good trap.
Good trap by Michigan. So we got to let people know, despite how great Carolina did play and the masterful execution, Michigan has chances here to win. It's just this. It's man, and it shows. It's a lot of. We're going to get into it afterwards, but there's not one play or one thing. I think we've been kind of saying that all night. Michigan, it's not like, it was a slam dunk. They had this game. They were outplayed throughout this game.
Yeah. Yeah, Carolina made it like their type of game. Exactly what they wanted to do. Half court, physical, defense battle. And then all of that, and Michigan still had an opportunity. Terrible shot.
Terrible shot.
Whoever saved his ass.
Awful decision.
Yeah. Yeah, that wastes a lot of time there.
But this is the key right here. From here on out, this is this sequence from here on out, from this free throw attempt on, this is what lives in infamy 30 years later. Everything we see.
Like the entire play. You know what I mean? Like
everything from here on out is infamous. It all connects to like I said, the most famous timeout maybe in sports.
Yeah.
He's an 8. Pat Sullivan at the line, 80% free, but he hadn't shot at all that night. He's an 80% free throw shooter.
And he looks like, if you're not watching this on YouTube with us, he wants 0 parts of this free throw.
Absolutely.
Like, he's not even sweating. He's cold coming off the bench. He nails the first one. Give him credit. His body's going nuts.
So it's right guy to foul. Let's see, it proves to be though.
Right.
Michigan fouled the right guy. But that was the first of the 1-1.
Important you get
great camera shots.
Yeah.
Misses that rebound.
Down. He's already trying to call a timeout. Travels. And
that travel.
He looked like he was panicking the whole entire time.
Yeah, he was. Wow.
So he's yelling at somebody on that bench. Somebody said call a timeout.
But you got to know better.
Yep. He was.
So give it to Jalen Rose.
Exactly. He struggled from the jump with the rebound. He was trying to call a timeout as soon as he got the ball.
And something made him stop. So that's why you can't yell at the bench. Something made you stop, which is why he traveled. Right. And so they're down 2. They get that rebound. They get a great thing here. Now, let me ask you this, though, Jose. What I always remember is the reaction of Dean Smith and the Carolina bench on that travel, which was not called. I've never seen a bench react. Yeah. Everyone's jumping up, going nuts on that one.
Dean used to jumping like I ain't never seen him jump like that.
Now, if the refs do the right thing and they call that travel on C-Web, does this sting as much? Is this as infamous if the travels gets called?
No. So if you look here, he's trying to call a timeout immediately.
He tries to call it there.
I'm going to answer your question in a minute. And then he just immediately panics, man. And it's hard to see this, honestly. Like, he was sprinting with the ball. Like, he was out of control. Now, I don't want to put this on Jalen Rose either, but if I'm Jalen Rose, I'm running right to him, like, immediately. He was nowhere to be found.
Well, Rose was up there. I think Rose was kind of surprised. Maybe he could have ran toward him. If you go back, Rose was, like, calling for it. He was there. Yeah, I don't know. I think a Carolina defender was close by, so I don't know if he was worried about it. But I think ultimately, yeah, Weber, there's so many thoughts running through his head.
Right.
And I kind of wonder, I was just going to say what Steve Fisher said in that timeout, because to me, you set up what happens there. You know, hey, he misses this free throw. This is what you got to do. And maybe he did it, and you know what? You can't control. Sometimes it's just nerves or nerves.
Right.
But I just wonder what was said in that timeout beforehand, that final timeout Michigan had.
Right. And I was going to say, to answer your question, Deremy, if they call travel there, I don't think it's as infamous. It's still a huge play, though. I think it's still something that's talked about. We're not doing the show on whoever's traveling. You know what I'm saying? Like, it happens. Like, I don't think we're going to – it's like this game is remembered as much. But it would have been a terrible, terrible turnover, you know. But the timeout, it was just that entire series was just, man, like youth at his best. You know what I mean? Like not at his best, but like just youth and nerves and like pressure, big game situations. Like talent is great, man. Talent is an amazing thing to have, but you got to be mentally tough. And that's I know a lot of people throw that out there like almost like a cop out, like like a good dig, but that was a tough situation. And he look at his face, man. He's heartbroken, dude. Like
in front of millions of people.
right, and he made a big mistake, the biggest mistake of his life on national TV. And Donald Williams steps to the line, just drains both free throws like nothing, which are harder free throws when there's nobody there.
Mm-hmm.
So you get the technical foul, two free throws, and the ball. Pretty much the game's over. Down 4, 8
Yeah,
seconds.
the game was done when that timeout and technical foul, and it's just, and you see he's just you feel for him, and honestly, you go back 30 years, you want to give the guy a hug
It's hard to watch it.
because
Like
yeah,
it's hard to watch. He's got his head down, low. In that 30 for 30, I think it was Jimmy King. They said he went to him and hugged him, and he said his whole body weight was just on him. Like that's terrible, man. I feel bad for the kid at that point.
and no one knows what it's like. No one's in Chris Webber's shoes, and it's easy for all of us to be like, "Oh, well, you got to do this or you got to do that," or "Hey, you're going to be the number one pick, so move on." But I mean, it's he knows it's his final game,
Yeah,
it's his final chance, and it's a big part of it. And like you said earlier, they have put themselves out there, and I wonder if he kind of knew, not to the full extent, but yeah, you're going to be partly defined by it, just because of who the Fab Five was in those 2 years and the notoriety they had in the country at the time. That like you're under a micro, and all these kids were, but especially these guys were under a microscope.
yeah. So two things there, like you know, Ray Jackson had fouled out, and Ray Jackson fouls out with 6 points. You know what I mean? Like in the national championship game, you got to play much better than that. And then you talked about Donald Williams and what kind of Final Four game he had. He showed it there. He had combined 50 points. You know what I mean? Like he was outstanding. You know what I'm saying? Like so, if we look at, like if we look at box score numbers, whatever, Carolina, Phelps, Phelps did what he did, right? 4 for 6. You know what I mean? 6 assists, 9 points. Donald Williams was named, most valuable player. 25 points. He had an amazing game, right? Montrose dropped his 16. Lynch dropped his 12. Brian Reese dropped his 8. And then Carolina was doing what they were doing. It was spread out, nice and even. But we talked about Weber had 23 points, but he was also, he shot 11 for 18. He had a great game. 11 rebounds, 3 blocks, but another guy, Juwan Howard, 7 points. You know what I'm saying? Like, he was too valuable to that team to play that type of game. He only took 8 shots. He was 3 for 8. He had 7 total rebounds. Jimmy King had 15 points, but he was 6 for 13. Oof, not good. And then Jalen Rose, I've been on him the whole game. Played 40 minutes. He was 5 for 12 for 12 points. Again, four assists, 6 turnovers.
And, that's a deadly one. Whenever you're any player, but especially a guard and a point guard, you have more turnovers than assists. That's a cardinal sin right there. You can't let that happen in any game, let alone the national title game.
Right. So I just think again, their youth and inexperience, even though they were in the Final Four the year before, it just showed this game. But also, I think the difference in coaching really stuck out to me. And I know you're a big Steve Fisher fan. I like Steve Fisher too, but we're talking T. Smith here, and I think there's levels to it. I always say, and that's a different level.
I respect Steve Fisher. I love Dean Smith, and to me, the thing about this thing is, I think that timeout takes away, and Dean Smith gets a lot of praise. So I'm not saying he's like underrated at any. Like Dean Smith, rightfully so, is rated high, and he should be. But this coaching performance in this game, it's overlooked, and the players too. So Donald Williams, Lynch, Montross played well as a unit. So Dean Smith, but the players too get not any praise because of the timeout for how well they played and how well Dean Smith coached. So it's cool to look back on this and be like, no, it wasn't like just Michigan just fumbled it away. They went up against a master game plan.
Right, and everybody talks about such an upset, and Michigan should have won this game, and rightfully so. But to your point, Deremy, it was a difference in like coaching, difference in talent level. But when you play the right way, you play hard, and when you have a great coach that's going to put you in the right position, this is what comes from it sometimes, and sometimes like effort and things like that will be talent, and it definitely did in this game. And again, I know we've been talking about mental toughness and things like that. It looked like Carolina definitely had that. They were ready for the moment. They were playing poised, and I just think Michigan wasn't, and they really North Carolina really exploited that, and Dean Smith in particular exploited that and knew exactly how to attack these guys, and just did a great job with that.
So I guess one of the two big questions for me is, if Chris Webber doesn't have this timeout, is his pro career different in your opinion?
No, I don't think so. I think what we saw is what I honestly think, not that he put it past him immediately, because he was devastated, but once he turned pro, it was all about, like, I think he was good. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think that would have shifted anything for him. I just think the pro career he had would have not changed. It's not like his draft stock was going to, not like he dropped or anything like that. He would have been drafted by the same team. I think the same attitude and behaviors continue. I don't really necessarily think so.
But we did do, those watching on YouTube, you can check our video archive. So check the video archive.
Check them.
We did rewatch the 0-2 Game 7 Kings-Lakers, which might be the biggest example of people being like, Chris Webber did not want to touch the ball. So do you think that is in his? Do you think that stayed in his head in clutch situations throughout his playing career?
It had to be. You know what I mean? Like, I think it had to. I think the clutch thing is also another thing that gets thrown around too much, and like, oh, you're not a clutch player, this and this and that. But when you have mistakes like that, that has to play in your mind somewhat. Now, maybe in the midst of like everything going on, you don't really think about it. But before, right after the timeout, when that play's been called and is drawn up, and you know what's coming to you, you're like, you know what? I'm just going to like get a quick pass out of that hot potato type of pass. I guess, you know what I'm saying? Like, I would think it would have to, it would for me, to be honest, until like I put myself in a position that I did something great and overcame something. Then I think after that, you can kind of like move on from that. But he never really did that. You know what I'm saying? Like, he never had that moment where he had an opportunity, but he didn't have that moment where, like I'm sure he had game winning shots, but big shots in playoffs and things like that, he never had that. So it had to play on his mind. It had to a little bit. So I guess in effect, like it kind of did, it affected his career in that aspect. But yeah, that is tough. That what happened with him is tough.
It's weird because it's not. We can point and you just keep it to basketball, even though the like, oh, what could have been. There's more what could have been careers. There's bigger like what could have been kind of careers than Chris Webber, but he is like a what could have been in a way.
In a way, yeah.
You just look at him and go, what could have been? Because this guy we saw, and I mean, on the big stage before that timeout, he's doing it on both ends of the floor because he's playing up against Eric Montross, 7-footer out of Carolina, and he's taking him on head on, and he has really no help offensively from his teammates as you went over the numbers. And he's getting 3 guys every time, and they're wearing on it. And like you said, it's a physical game, so it's not even like they're kind of like just around him and they're hitting him. Mm-hmm. And he put up a great performance, and it's just that sequence. And the sad part is, we'll never really know, and a big part of that is due to Chris Webber, what really happened throughout all of that. And to me, I want to know what happened in that timeout, what was talked about, Was it talked about we have no more timeouts left? Was it talked about what to do if he misses the 1-and-1? Because that needs to be going over. If he makes the 2 free throws, okay. But then if he honestly, all should go over. You should go over everything because you have no more timeouts left.
Right.
So at that point, you got to go over everything. So was it lack of communication in the huddle? Did C-Web just go blank?
Right. Did he not hear it? Was he not paying attention? Because apparently in the 30 for 30, they talk about it. It was stated in the timeout that they had no more timeouts. So is he not like paying attention? To go back to what you were talking about, like if he was that nervous or if he knew the play was coming to him, I got to make this shot. Like a lot of what ifs.
Or what we can honestly say, which people don't bring up, but that's why we do this from this rewatch. Part of me wonders, did he not believe in his teammates in that game? Did he think that he had to do it all? Hey, Jalen Rose has got to throw the ball too. But like you have said tonight, more turnovers than assists. He's getting no help out there. Juwan did not show up. Ray Jackson has found out he didn't show up. Jimmy King didn't. Jalen is streaky. Not saying those were his guys that he didn't, but in that moment, did he think, like you said, the play's going to him.
Right.
Did he just think, I got to do it all? And like that was just too much pressure. And if one of those guys steps up, A, are they in that position anyway? As close to the game, I think if one of them plays well, are they even in this spot? Or B, if they're still at that kind of a spot, does he feel more worthy, more okay to trust them? I just kind of wonder now. Yeah. I don't think people throw that in there, but you got to throw it in there. He had no help that night offensively.
Right. He probably felt like I'm going to take this down and just take a shot, And if that was his thought process, I totally get that. You know what I'm saying? And it's a valid thought process because we it's been talked about. It's been talked about, documented, videoed. Like these guys were struggling, and if he, and even to that point, right? Like if he pulls it out and gives it to Jalen and goes down low, he knows there's 3 guys on him. You know what I'm saying? So he probably figured maybe, you know what, I'm going to take it down. And he was in a full sprint. I'm going to take it down and try to create something. I don't know. He did run straight to the corner. So that, I don't know either. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a lot of questions I would love, and he doesn't need to answer them for me. You know what I'm saying? Like I think, honestly, he just needs to clear the air for himself, and to talk about what was going through his mind. He might write a book one day, and this is when it's going to come out and make a lot of money off this book. But, that's a good point because I never thought about that. And that happens a lot when star athletes go, you know what, these guys ain't doing it. I'm just going to grab the ball and do it on my own. And he did.
Yeah. And, one thing I think Dean Smith said after the game, which they asked him, do you think that timeout overshadows what happens? And he said, well, he kind of, Dean was always classy. He was like, well, Chris played well and there's a lot going on and he did travel, but, he's like, let's give props to the guys. It was George and I forget who else. They trapped him really well. Travel should have been called, but he brings it up and they're all over him. And that trap was tough.
Yeah.
And like it had been all night by Carolina, they played great D, but it was a lot for him too. So,
good point. Yeah. Because if there's not that trap and he's just one guy on him, he can just kick it right back out to somebody else. But the trap, I think, escalated the anxiety even more, from the travel to him just running down the court. And then now he's on the corner and now he's freaking out. And then these 2 guys, 2 good defenders, running right at him. And I think that was like the cherry on top.
But, it's kind of poetic justice because not the time I feel for Chris Webber, but if they score and tie that game up on that missed travel,
I know,
which is like the biggest, most obvious trap. I think if you don't like the game of basketball and you're just learning, you've watched Chris Webber, you go, you can't do. It just was like, how did you miss that call in the first place? I've never seen a bench react the way when that travel wasn't called. The whole Carolina bench is like jumping. They're all like levitating, and they're all doing like this. It was that bad.
Huge play. Yeah, it's a huge play, and I just think the refs are like, I'm swallowing this whistle. I'm not calling anything at this moment. Like, I don't. You're right. I don't know how how you don't call that.
But just, man, if they would have tied that game into that missed call, oof,
Yeah,
that would have been bad. The refs would have been talked about that night more than Chris Webber.
yeah, no, and then oof, that I never thought about that. That's a good point.
Is for me, I guess the final thing is this the first thing that you think of when you think of the Fab Five?
Yes, like I do. Unfortunately, I do, and I mean, I think of like a lot of what we were talking about earlier with like that, like that hip hop, like all that stuff they brought to the table. But this is the one where I'm like, man, like it's it's failure. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that's a bad word. And I don't like using that word, but it's exactly what it is. All this talent, and it not that it went to waste, but they just couldn't get over the hump. And
Yeah,
they had an opportunity to do so, and they just literally dropped the ball. So yeah, the timeout is what I think about immediately. What about you, Darren?
I think it's what I think about, and it just was something that was sullied. I think, what we'll see what Juwan Howard's tenure as Michigan's coach what it brings. I know it got the Final Four appearance, but
Yeah,
it's
I
like,
don't think it's bringing too much.
I don't know, but I think that is the big, they were banished,
Yeah,
and the banners were taken down, and it's not talked about. It was a shame kind of a thing, and that's where the documentary, that's like 2011. That's where that came out from, and then the past, going on now 12 years, it's been that journey. C Webb distanced himself. C Webb and Jalen had a public beef.
yeah,
You know, they go to when Michigan was in the Final Four pre Juwan. You see four of them together, but Weber, it was always just as imbalanced.
right.
The doc is not all of them. Weber didn't get into the Hall of Fame. Then he gets to the Hall of Fame. It's that awkward interview. I don't care what anyone says. That was awkward. And
Yeah,
he says he got like bum rushed. He didn't know Jalen would be interviewing him, but Jalen talks to him. It's just all been kind of weird, and I feel like
very public.
they're
Yeah,
they're trying to get them to a spot where they're remembered, but until they're on the same page, we can't get past the timeout. So to me, they're a big reason why the timeout is the first thing,
right.
because they're just so fractured and all over the place by their own. And so I don't knock the young kids I've watched in this game, but now these are grown ass men who are doing this, so I can knock you all day. I'm sorry, I can't. And it's just like that's where I get frustrated at. It's like, come on the same page. Y'all did, whether it's overhyped or not, you're part of history. Get together and unite. And there's no reason why C Webb shouldn't have been in that documentary. It's just
No,
like, what are you doing, bro? Like, it's
no,
disappointing.
right. And I just think it adds to it. It's adding fuel at this point to, oh yeah, like this timeout, this timeout, this timeout, and they just come out and squash it. Then it's going to be a squash. Like it'll be remembered, but at least it's like explained and things like that. Like the way they're leaving it up in the air, it's making it worse, and it's making you want to just continue to like watch it and feed into it. And it doesn't have to be like that anymore.
And I go back, ESPN spoke to him in fall of 2021 when he got into the Hall of Fame and, headlined it. He already told the Fab Five, the timeout, and all that stuff, and Michigan ban. And it's probably the most he has spoken about it since, at that point it was 28 years. But still, he doesn't really. He says it was, he was devastated, but then he says, I'm past that. I would show my son this game because look, I did all this stuff, and I'm just like, you did keep going. Like, I'm not saying like you just quit life for it, which is good, but I'm like, can you honestly look at
Yeah,
yourself and only he knows it and say that you really did get past this? I don't know. It doesn't feel like it. Maybe he did. I don't know. I'm not in his shoes. But I read that. I reread that quote to get ready for this episode, and I'm just like, it never felt like you got past it though. But maybe he did. I don't know.
I don't know. Weber's a good actor. Like he was a good fake tough guy. Like he wanted to act like he was like this street dude when he never was. And look, I'm not. That's a good thing. Like you know what I'm saying. Like I'm not knocking him for that. But the way he was like portraying himself, he was like this big bad tough guy. He was not that. You know what I'm saying. Like which is okay to be, but he didn't want to be that. He was, to me, he's a guy that's not comfortable in his own skin. And I don't know the guy. I just saw from like just stuff I see and read and interviews I've saw and just him watching him throughout his career. He played here in Philly a couple of years. Like he just is someone who just I think he is not past that. You know what I'm saying? Like I from what I can see, he's just that type of guy that is going to act like everything is fine and you know he's moved on and he's overcome it, but it's probably bothering him every single day. I don't know, but he's just again like he's a good actor and he was acting a lot in Michigan. He was acting a lot in the NBA. So I don't see why that stopped out of nowhere. You know what I'm saying? Like, and again, I'm not like trying to shit on him so much, but like don't say stuff like that. Like talk about like how much it bothered you. Like just be honest. You know what I'm saying? Like that's what people want. People don't want like you to sugarcoat it or you got through it like it was no big deal because it was a huge deal.
It's the Isaiah Thomas thing. It's the I didn't do it, but he did it. You know, it's like we got you on camera, man.
Yeah.
We saw you did it, and it's like that's what I look at. Like
Chris
Webber.
I could just see it.
Yeah.
Like, did you? Like yeah, we did.
Yeah. It's like see what I'm doing that. No, I'm fine. Are you?
Yeah.
Because then why do you have this big public thing with Jalen, and then he talked about he's going to do his document. Oh, I'm going to have my own documentary. That movie came out 12 years ago, bro. Where's your documentary at? I'm gonna write this in a book. And then no, you're not. You didn't want to talk about it, and you were mad that they talked about it. And maybe Jalen could have been more private about some of his comments. I don't knock that, but it's the Isaiah thing. It's the now after the Last Dance, he's saying what he should have said. You walked off the court because you were mad that you were losing to the Bulls, A, and B, that the Bulls had called you guys bad for basketball, not great champions and all that. And guess what? If you admit that this whole time, I don't knock you, whether right or wrong. Yeah, it's a rivalry. You were pissed. You didn't like their comments. Go ahead. The fact that you're trying to be like, that's what you did when you left. You walked off the court, and Boston did that to us. You're a freaking liar, Isaiah, just like C-Web be lying. Because Isaiah, Boston left the court because the crowd was going to bum rush. They were on the road. You were home in 91. No one's going to bum rush the court. So they both have that thing, and it clouds their legacies. It just does. Like
both of them.
Yeah.
That's good comparison because, it does for both of them. And that's sad because they were both great players.
And I think they were honest. Even with, like you said earlier, with the mistakes, they would be embraced. And that's the funny part. They're trying to be embraced. And I think they don't get, if they were honest about their screw-ups, that would make them more embraced.
Right.
And that's just what's hilarious. They're what they're trying to get, they're hurting themselves from getting. And so,
yeah, it's a crazy cycle. Like you're just living in it forever.
Yeah, I just think that's just what it is. Like, so it's a shame that this game, because sometimes you look at it and man, you're right. It was hard to see him. You're looking at a 20-year-old guy make the biggest mistake of, I don't know about his life, but definitely his athletic career in front of the whole world to see. Yeah, I felt so bad even rewatching that and just. You could tell he wanted to run off the court right there. If he could, he would have done that. But I feel bad for that guy. I don't know how much I feel bad for the guy these 30 years after, though.
Yeah, I don't feel bad for the adult Chris Webber at all. I do feel bad for that Carolina team. Again, I know we talked about it a few times. They played a great game. You know what I'm saying? Like they played, especially defensively. They played a great defensive game, and it all gets like. Not even talked about, because again, like it's all about the timeout and Webber, and rightfully so. Like that was a huge, huge play in college basketball history and sports history, But there was another side to that game, and it was just a great, great job by Dean, Coach Smith, all those players, man. And they frustrated. They put the clamps on that Fab Five team. And honestly, rewatching this again, I've rewatched the game just like you, Deremy, a bunch of times. just throughout the years. And I like this watching it now. It's like, wow, they really like locked them down. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I just got to give all that credit to that team. They just outplayed them, out hustled them. Like, it was just masterful job.
It was great performance, great time. When a lot of pressure was on them as well. That's not
Right.
talked about. A lot of pressure was on that Carolina team, that Carolina program, and it was a good answer back to Coach K and his back-to-back titles. So this was worth the wait, man. This was so
Yeah.
fun to do. And it's one of those ones you knew it's going to be intense and heavy because it's just you're looking back on it and it's like, hey, we both on this show want to give these guys, when we look back, a fair chance and make sure we're calling it right and trying to be understanding of it. And it's going to keep living on in infamy. Sad to say, it will. And I think even if he does right, it's still going to be known. But it's just been hurt, and it's going to still be infamous and still be a big deal every March.
Yep.
Yeah, every Final Four.
He can't shake this. He's not going to be able to shake this. So.
No. But this was a fun rewatch, man, and everyone, let us know what you think. I think what should be talked about from this more, like Jose just said, 93 Carolina, Dean Smith coaching, the way this team played and performed in this game. But is this the first? Let us know if you think this is the first thing you think of when it comes to the Fab Five. Maybe his bald head, black socks, and baggy shorts. Those are nice, but it ain't number one for us. But we'd love to hear it from you guys. But Jose, this was an awesome episode, man.
No, I'm glad we did it too. And again, I know you're watching us on YouTube or listening to us, but if you have any thoughts on this game or this rewatch, just hit us up on Twitter at Bigger Game Pod. You can also hit us up on Instagram, the same handle at Bigger Game Pod. On YouTube, the Bigger the Game with Deremy and Jose. And just let us know what you think. Comment on this video. Comment on social medias, and we can definitely have that interaction on there. But yeah, we got more stuff to come. This is March Madness, so this is a fun time of year. But yeah, let us know what you think, or let us know what other episodes you wanted to tackle, any other games, anything this big. We would love to do that for y'all.
For the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Jose Ruiz, I'm Deremy Dove. Thank you guys for watching Bigger Than the Game with Deremy and Jose.
Peace.